Let's have this discussion now. The ANC in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature has tabled a motion proposing the establishment of a task team to deal with the theft of public infrastructure in the province. Damages to roads, rail and electricity infrastructure worth millions have prompted this move. It's believed that organized criminal syndicates are behind the stripping of crucial infrastructure. In fact, the proposal includes legislation stopping scrap metal dealers, for instance, from trading stolen or vandalized material, and harsh penalties for those found guilty of destroying public infrastructure. How will this work? Let's bring in Sizakela Nkosi-Malobane. She's the chair of chairs in the Gauteng Legislature and joins us now via our video link. Sizakela, thanks for making time. It's great to see you. So many, of course, will agree that, of course, we need to try and ensure that we improve the economy of the province, and a crucial part of that will be safeguarding our infrastructure. But why is a task team the solution to that?
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. We have proposed a task team, and we're not just calling it a task team, but it's a rapid response task team that is properly skilled and properly resourced in order to respond to such criminal activities. We've also observed that it's not just ordinary unemployed people who are actually involved in this thing, but we believe that it is an organized group, in this case a syndicate, that is involved in destroying our public infrastructure.
What is it about our law enforcement units in their current form that isn't enough?
I mean, they're overstretched. I'm sure all of us know that they're actually dealing with almost everything. Be it there's murder cases, they need to respond. There's house robberies, they need to respond, etc., etc. But in this case, we need a team that is properly resourced and properly focused in terms of responding to such cases. But it should also be people who are actually trained in terms of dealing with syndicates. Currently, the teams that are actually responding to these criminals are teams that are actually all over the place, meaning they respond to everything. So these ones, we want them to actually be focused and make sure that everything we do is actually successful. And success means people being arrested and people being prosecuted and sent to prison for a very long, long time.
And so who would be part of this team? I don't imagine you take it from the law enforcement officials who you have admitted are already overstretched.
Yeah, but no, we will be taking from them. Some of the people that will be taken into this testing are people that are already trained as police officers.
So you're gonna take from a unit or law enforcement officials who are already stretched. Help us understand the logic there.
No, some of them will actually, and for example, in Johannesburg, we've got officers that were trained and not properly trained, and they're to be taken back to I'm just making that as an example, taken back to the academy for retraining, and those young people are now ready to actually be deployed anywhere. Such people can be targeted and be trained on how to respond to such an event. Ekurhuleni the same, as well as Tshwane and other district municipalities. But I think most of these people will be coming from SAPS, and SAPS being the one that will lead the team that is actually going to rapidly respond to such an activity. And by the way, it is not only law enforcement agencies that need to be involved. We also need to have prosecutors that understand how this thing operates, because police do arrest these people, but unfortunately, because the criminal justice system is not properly organized, they end up being released. And we want to make sure that our prosecutors will have to be, in all courts, by the way, in Gauteng, will have to be properly briefed and, of course, sometimes properly trained in order for them to be able to present such cases in front of magistrates or in front of judges.
I want to stay with the people who are likely to constitute this task team, if I can. So you're saying among those members who would be in the team would be individuals who weren't fully trained initially, and they would, I guess, provide this extra capacity. If they weren't fully trained then, whenever that was, why should we be confident that they'd be trained adequately now? What's changed?
We're confident that they're adequately trained. I mean, these people went to an academy for more than 2 years. first when there were issues about, and remember the training that we're talking about is issues of how to handle a gun, etc., etc. It was not the whole training. So such people have had an opportunity to be in training for 2 years, and we do believe that they are actually properly trained now, and an extra training on how to handle the destruction of our infrastructure is also an added advantage for them. And the other thing about them is also they're very young, by the way. Majority of them are younger than 25. So they've got energy to respond whenever they're called to respond to such a situation. Hence, we call them a rapid response team.
So younger, mostly inexperienced members of this team who are meant to deal with complex syndicates that existing law enforcement officials are struggling to deal with. It doesn't sound like it makes sense.
The team leaders are not inexperienced. Team leaders are actually properly experienced. And to be young doesn't necessarily mean that they're not properly skilled. They are properly skilled. Hence, I've indicated to you that these people are people who've been to training for more than 2 years. They were sent back twice to the training facilities. And it was not because they were not able to be trained or untrainable. There were things that were outstanding in terms of their training, and those things have been properly addressed. And we believe that with such people who have energy, who have proper training, who have got proper skills, with proper leaders who are experienced in the field, they will be able to respond rapidly to destruction of our infrastructure.
Many people will be disillusioned by the establishment of yet another task team. Why not take those individuals who have raving reviews from you and use them to boost existing structures that are already there?
We need a focus team. I've indicated to you that currently our officers are actually all over the place because of the challenges societal problems that we have on the ground. They are expected to respond to people who are drug addicts. They are expected to respond to rape, expected to respond to murder, etc., etc. So you need a focused team that will be able to respond to this particular challenge. I mean, there were times when we had something called pristine murder and robbery unit. And that unit, because they were focused, they were able to effectively deal with murder and robbery. And in this case, we're saying, let this team be focused on dealing with such a challenge in order for them to be effective. It doesn't necessarily mean that in SAPS there are no other task teams that are responsible for serious challenges. For example, the cash in transit teams have been very successful because they were focused in terms of dealing with these issues. We also have teams that are dealing with women and children abuse. The reason why they're successful is because they are also focused. So this is an added team of people that are focused on a challenge, and we believe that they will actually be successful. And not just focus, but they need to be properly resourced in terms of making sure that they are actually effective. They need cars, they need guns, they also need skills, as indicated earlier.
Very quickly, Sizakela, the cynics among us will say it's very difficult to look at this kind of proposal outside of a context of an election year. It might be seen as you just trying to get votes. How will you be holding a task team like this accountable?
When this motion was submitted, the election date was not even mentioned. And unfortunately, as a person that has been involved in safety and security before, I'm very concerned about what happened in our country. And I'm very concerned that the people who are affected are people who are very poor. I mean, currently, the issue of not using trains is affecting people who are actually the poor of the poorest. And that is what we're concerned about. Because the destruction of infrastructure don't just affect rich and high-profile people, but it affects the poorest. People have got there's interruption in water supply, interruption in electric supply, there's interruption in terms of transport services, and that is what we are actually caring about. Election or no elections, this challenge is there, and this challenge needs to be dealt with. before and after the elections, this challenge must be dealt with. And unfortunately, we're not going to be intimidated that every time we want to come with something good for our country or for our province, and people will then raise the issue of elections. When are we going to be able to work? Because even after this, there will be elections, national and provincial election, and when we introduce something, it will then be said it's because of election. It is not because of election, it is because it's a service that needs to be provided to our people, and we are not going to allow a situation where we are intimidated whenever we come with something good, and people will then actually link it